just introduce yourself to the group in terms of those that don't completely know, and share a little bit of your story, because I know it's a relatively unique one as well.
Yeah. So what's up, guys? What I'll start off with is growing up, I was the guy that honestly, I didn't think I was good enough. I struggled with actually improving my performance, because for me personally, baseball was what I wanted to do. Are all these guys baseball guys for the most part?
I'd say everybody in here is going to be baseball guys. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to do growing up. And it's just the skill level that I was at wasn't where I needed to be. And so I was always the guy that was just I'm not good enough. I need to work. I need to train. I need to figure out and try to find whatever way possible I can to be able to get to that place that I want to go. And for me, that really started, that started as early as 8th grade, where it was just diving into internet forums. That's what we had back then. It's basically, not that it's that long ago, but it was internet forums, which is essentially Instagram now or Twitter now or TikTok now or whatever is Instagram or internet forums back then. And it was really just me going in and diving in to find anything that I could find, because I was just literally, I was just that scrappy dude that is I'm not good enough yet, and I need to figure out how to get there, and I'm going to try to take in all the information that I could. And that level of investment, there's things that were good and things that were bad about the way that I approached that. The things that were good is it is very good for what I do now, because there's very little that I haven't tried or experimented with or taken myself to the edge with. Right. That's the good thing for me and for the people that I work with. The thing that wasn't good for me, though, was for the speed of my development as an actual player and as an actual athlete. Because I might have taken 2 years to figure out something that I could have got from somebody else in 3 months, because they'd already gone through it. All I did, though, was I stayed in my little in my little corner, took in all the information that I could, and I tried to experiment with all of it all by myself. And that, again, that helped me, but it also to some degree held me back, because I didn't put myself in these environments that would help me grow. And so one of the biggest transitions that I made from, then until now, what I've realized is I want to put both of those together, where I'm going to work my ass off or do whatever I have to do to find the information that I want to have that is going to actually help get me better and get my athletes better. But then also to throw myself in environments with other people that have already done that and that are actually smarter than me, and realizing that there might be things that I don't know because they're getting results that I'm not getting. So it's that combination that has really worked for me now, which is I'm still going hard as hell on my own training and research, but at the same time, I'm okay, there's other people that I can open myself up to and actually go visit and see those people. So that's kind of a very shortened version of the journey that I had, but it's well worth taking. And yeah, you guys definitely enjoy it while you're in it, because it's worth the ride.
What would you say? I know you mentioned that kind of try to take as much information as possible. Who would you say were kind of some of the big, 2 or 3 that still kind of stick with you now, that you look back to and you're like, hey, I'm happy I was definitely around those guys that kind of leaned into some of that knowledge?
Yeah, so, man, there's been a lot of guys. The first place that I ever went was, did you ever go to? The first place I went was Texas Baseball Ranch. So this was back in, this was probably back in 2009, 2010. That was kind of the first baseball training thing that I ever went to. So I went there for a month, and it was completely different environment. And that really just introduced me to other people that really wanted to attempt to do something that was more than they probably otherwise would be able to do. They were motivated, inspired, whatever you want to say, people there. And that was my first introduction to that. So that helped. I went to Driveline really early on.
Oh, by the way, I meant to mention, sorry to interrupt you, but Tyson Ross said to tell you hello.
Yeah. What's up? Yeah. But Driveline I went to early on. What else? And more recently, the work of Jay Schroeder has had a large impact. And I can get into that more if we want. Some of the work of Tommy John. Some of those guys have had more of a recent impact on me, but there's been a whole slew of guys, even, Eric Crusty, I studied him for a long time when I was in high school. That's who I really first started with. Now I think differently for sure, but he was a stepping stone, or not even that he's a stepping stone, but that was just one of the steps that I took along the path. Right. And so that's the way that I've always done in terms of learning from people, is whatever I'm interested in right now, I'm going to dive fully in that thing right now. And then when I've like pulled everything that I can pull out of that, it's like, okay, what am I interested in next? And then I'm going to dive into that next thing and do that long enough, and you accumulate like a wealth of knowledge that you can then use and apply for yourself.
You mentioned Schroeder's training style, and so I've been around guys that have been kind of blended of, obviously you are one of them that's programmed for me specifically, but then like Dr. Alex Lee at Circadian, I know we've kind of at times hinted, talked about him a little bit. So he's been around kind of that Jay Schroeder, and he was actually one of Tommy John's first guys as well that actually trained with them. So lean in, just because that's my direct experience, and I think that's where I've gotten the biggest. Looking at training way different than you brought up Eric Cressy, than the kind of stock Eric Cressy program, which you need time and place for. But kind of talk about what Schroeder and TJ, kind of what's different about them, and for those of the guys that are kind of in this and watching this that don't really understand maybe where their psychology about training comes from and how it might differ from a so-and-so stock, Eric Cressy strength training program.
Yeah. So I can give my interpretation on it, right? Obviously, if you want to hear their direct experience, you need to talk directly to them. My interpretation of it, and specifically more so with Schroeder, is that the basic principle is you have to, for something to cause change, you need to apply enough or a high enough level of stress for the system to need to adapt to that stimulus or to that stress. So if we take that and we layer into what that actually means in a training program, right? That's where, to me, the difference between 3 sets of 8 scap wall slides, or 3 sets of 8 dumbbell bench at 80%, or like a 30-second Bulgarian hold with just body weight. Like, that's where the difference between those things, or the difference between those things, and then something more like what you probably experience in my programming, which is, a set of impulses till satisfied, or a set of impulses till fail, or a slow lower deep push-up for 3 minutes, or these different things, or the way that I'll program these things is whatever it is that we're doing, I want to do it at a level that actually causes your system to change. Like, it almost provides some type of shock to your system, to where it's like, oh shit, like I have to adapt to that thing. If I don't, I'm going to die. Not necessarily that's like die, but it's like that level of almost like depth that we want to get to, where it's literally like, this is really hard and I need to change so that I don't have to go through this again. And to me, that is the difference between actually making change and just going in and working out. Because it's one of the biggest things that has actually helped me progress as an athlete. Because when we first opened this up, for me, I said, I was always that dude that, was like scrappy and wanted to like learn everything and just didn't feel like I was quite good enough. The thing that actually got me to the point where I was like, I'm actually making change, and I could probably look at myself and be like, okay, I can do some cool stuff now, right? The thing that actually helped me make that transition was the understanding of that basic concept, where if I want to do what freaks do, I need to physically do what freaks do. So that means if I'm going to be in a slow lower deep push-up, like, I'm not just going to do it for a minute and be like, oh, that's good for today, and I'll build up. It's like, I need to take that to as extreme of like a range as I can today, because that is what's going to cause my system to get stimulus and to adapt. And you do that, and now you can actually start to change yourself. Again, it's like the difference between actually changing versus working out. It's that you provide a level of stimulus that is great enough to actually cause adaptation in your body. And so that's the biggest thing that I got from Schroeder, was like just the stuff that most people aren't willing to program. Because even in terms of strength coaches or trainers or whatever, if you're more worried about injuring the athlete, and I'm not trying to injure athletes, right? There's a fine line. But if we're so worried about like keeping everything bubble wrapped and safe that we're not actually willing to apply a real stimulus to them, what are we doing? Like, you're not actually going to change that person. And so just understanding that has helped me to get so much more progress with the people that I actually work with, because we actually have to do enough of something to cause you to change.
So I want to lean into the word change, and I can speak into it because I trained with you, and it's one of the first things that I talked about with you. And okay, like, I want to do this thing, I want to train with you and get ready for this upcoming season, where it was, I felt like there was, I don't know if you remember our conversation, but it was like, hey, look, kind of there's like this dimmer on me, not only physically, like this kind of light switch dimmer. I couldn't get all the way up to 100%. And I had done some of TJ's training and stuff like that. There was more that I needed physically, but I want to look into a little bit more of kind of intellectually / spiritually and how I view it. They kind of mesh together, right? So can you talk a little bit about how the way that you program and see strength and conditioning, how it kind of leads into the intellectual / kind of spiritual side of how you program?
Yes. So first of all, we're going to start with an individual is not going to be able to physically do what you're not emotionally, spiritually, intellectually willing to invest. Like, I don't know, what's a good example? If I were to try to drop off a 10-foot height and land it, right? If I'm not like mentally, spiritually engaged in that, I'm not going to be able to like physically turn on fast enough to be able to actually do that, right? And so we can only take one up as high as another is. So physical can only go as high as emotional spirit is, or spirit can only go as high as we're willing to physically invest, or emotion can only go as high as we intellectually understand what it is that we're doing. All these different aspects are extremely important because we can only go as high as any of the others are, because they all have to work in order to elicit that output, right? And so as it relates to the training that we do, something that we'll do is like the sets where we'll go, usually it's either joint moves, it's impulses, it's something that's a very, very simple and easy move to do, right? Let's say we do a joint move and we do one set until you feel exactly how you want to feel, right? That is the end point of that, until you feel exactly how you want to feel, necessitates that before you start, you figure out how is it that I want to feel. Because so it's not that we're just doing a set of 100, because like that's what it says on the sheet, which is fine. We can do that sometimes, and we do that sometimes. But when we change it from a set to 100 till a set until you feel how you want to feel, now you first have to intellectually understand or look at like, okay, how do I actually want to feel? And then you create that through the exercise that you do to end and get to the point that you feel how you want to feel. So you get a better intellectual understanding of how it is that you want your body to feel, right? Versus just being like, no, I got to go do a set of 100 and I don't want to do it and whatever. It's like, okay, great. Then don't do it. but like it's the way that it's structured is literally to pull out your intellectual understanding. So that would be an example of that. An example of spirit could be like sometimes we'll say go. It'll be either like go until fail or go until you don't want to anymore, right? And so your ability to go until you don't want to anymore is essentially especially on moves that are very simple, again, like the joint moves or like the impulses, where in those moves, there's not really anything external in terms of load that's going to cause you to have to stop. If we were to do a heavy squat, heavy bench press, there's load that is acting down on you that could get heavy enough that would actually cause you to stop because you're not physically strong enough anymore, or you're not able to spiritually invest to physically be strong enough yet, however we want to say it, right? But if we do the set where it's like go until you don't want to anymore, that's essentially a measure of how much are you spiritually willing to invest in this? Because when you don't want to anymore is essentially when you quit on that thing. And so it's a way of figuring out when is it that I actually quit on that thing. And like, how aggressive can I be with this? How antagonistic am I towards this? It's a way to measure your own spirit's investment in it. And the way that I look at spirit is, I don't know how deep we want to go, but I'll just go there, right? The way that
Go for it.
Yeah, the way that I look at spirit is, even if you ask somebody what controls your body, or like who are you or what are you, and be like, okay, I'm my brain. Like my brain is what causes me to do things. But I'm like, okay, so you're a brain cell, and I'll be like, no. Okay, so then what are you, right? And it's like that's where the spirit is. Like the spirit causes your brain cells to fire signals to then cause your body to move into act, right? And so that's where it's like how much impact can you have on your actual physical tissue, on your physical body, and setting up the rep schemes like that is a way to measure, address, and prove that.
I love it. Firing me up here, Brady. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I want to. You brought up impulses, and we're going to skip around here in terms of kind of that sheet that I sent you. But
That's
think
fine.
Yeah. So, I think the first thing that people see and notice that's obviously different in how you program or just exercise selection wise is obviously the impulses, besides some of the other things that you bring to the table for sure. Can you, 10,000 foot overview, I mean, go as deep as you want, but just talk about the impulses. I speak into how much they affected my ability to recover and so many different things past year in my own season of playing. But yeah, please dive into the impulses and honestly kind of how, even share why they came about for you in terms of your own programming, things like that too.
Yeah. Okay. So the impulses I originally got from somebody else. We were doing, I was working at an in-person facility, and he brought them in, and we had like 2 that we did at the time, and they did them. We were doing them with chains, like these heavy chains up against the squat racks. It was just like loud as hell. Like they physically wore like earplugs because it was so loud to protect their hearing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But so the original like thought process with them is all we're doing is we're taking and we're applying a stimulus to the body. We're applying a stimulus to the system. So think about like let's say this is me and I'm lifting a weight, right? If I'm moving like normal speed lifting a weight, let's say I'm doing a bicep curl, like I have consistent weight tension throughout the whole thing, and that is the stimulus that's being applied to my body. If I'm doing an impulse, there's still this stimulus being applied to my body, but now it's just that. So it's very rapid. If you think about a graph in terms of how fast the impact hits your system, if we're doing like just a normal, let's say bicep curl, the graph might look something like this. Like it's not that, it doesn't peak very fast. It kind of goes up gradually, right? An impulse is like it peaks immediately, right? So the difference is, or both of those are stimuluses that are coming into our body. It's just the type of stimulus that it is different. One peaks very fast and one peaks very slow, and it has constant tension. So as it relates to then why I use them for our body is like, we want to train your body at all different levels of that spectrum, where it can go very fast, it can go very slow, and it can go in the middle. Because those different inputs, fast, slow, middle, have different effects on your actual physical tissue. Like if you think about, we have muscle, we have tendon, we have ligaments, we have these different things that make our body. If we do something very fast, like an impulse, that's going to have a greater effect on the tendons, because tendons, I don't know how deep you want to go, but like muscles contract isometrically, and then the force goes into the tendons. That's what happens when it like strikes very fast. When it's slower, the muscles are actually working and less goes into the tendons. So they have different effects on your body. And so my goal, or the reason that I use the impulses, is simply to be able to train that end of the spectrum. Like we want to train you to be able to peak force very rapidly, to be able to accept and produce force very rapidly. We don't do only impulses, because if we only did that, then we wouldn't support the other end of that, like that physical tissue structure, right? But it's all different levels of stimulus that we can put into your body and prepare you to go throw. Because if we think about throwing, like throwing is a very fast and very rapid action. So we do want to be able to produce that peak force, and that's one of the reasons that I like those, because we can use a very simple impulse rep. Like let's say that we go with the shoulder IR impulse, where all we're doing is this, or we go with the ER, where all we're doing is this over and over. We can put that peak force into your tissues at very high volumes, so that now when you go to throw, you go to pitch in a game or whatever it is, your arm is now prepared to handle that volumes, or to handle those volumes. Because what we want to do is we want to take the volume that you have in training, have it up here, and have you actually able to recover from that volume. So what I mean by recover from that volume is like, we can do the volume that we have in training, and your body is still recovered and able to go and able to function, able to work well. If the volume of our training is up here and the volume of your game is actually here, that means that you're prepared to do what we want you to do during that game. If the volume of our training is down here, that means we now put you at risk when we put you in the game, right? So that's like one of the reasons that we'll do the high volume impulses, is that to be able to actually prepare your physical tissues, you mentally, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, be able to handle the actual structures that are going to come in during a game. And impulses, like I said, are one area of that spectrum that we can use to prepare your physical body.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Explaining everything as always, of course, super well. So I appreciate that, man. I know, especially when I've had athletes come on early, they're like, what, like literally what are we doing? You know? And it's like, listen, it works. So having you on here and as a video that I can send guys back to is going to be humongous. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So I want to go back. I think we've done a relatively kind of 10,000 foot overview. I might pull some slow lower kind of why slow lowers here later on too. But one thing, speaking into your own, career, and just if you had to do one thing largely different, not only on the baseball field, but just overall health and slash performance in general. Brady today could go back and talk to high school Brady. What would you say, and what are some of those things that you might swap out in terms of even day to day, just like routines? Obviously, you're very, very aware of what you're putting into your body, being nutrition and sunlight and everything like that. So, what are one, or if you got a couple, what are some of the main things you'd want to change there?
I can give a couple specific routines. So it would be understanding in terms of food. The way that I eat now is I simply want to eat real food. And so what that means is I'm going to have like steak, I'm going to have chicken, I'm going to have a potato, I'm going to have a carrot, I'm going to have an apple. Like I'm going to have something that's actually food, where the ingredient list, it's probably not going to be more than 5 or 6 long, and everything that's on there, I'm like, okay, I know what that is, I know what that is, I know what that is. And so it's just very simply, I eat real food, actual food, and then off of that, I know where it's coming from. And where it's coming from is the way that that food is actually meant to be prepared. And what I mean by that is, if we think about if I think about me and the environment that a human being is supposed to be in to be able to be healthy and be optimal, right? It's like, okay, we have a good amount of time outside. We're not super stressed all the time, or we're able to, relative to what we're able to handle, it's not like overwhelming, right? We're in an environment that is good for us and that keeps us healthy. If I were to take myself and put myself in a basement for 90 days straight, see the sun twice during that time, and get fed like Cheetos every other day, my health would be absolutely terrible, right? So when I look at what it is that I'm consuming, I understand that what I'm consuming also is affected by the environment that they're in, right? So if I'm getting a steak from a cow that is in an environment that they're not meant to be in, they're just like packed super tight, they're in darkness all the time, they're getting fed like feed that's been modified, etc. Like all these different things that are going to impact that cow. I'm like, I don't want that environment coming into me because that's going to affect me. So I want to know the source of the real food that I'm eating and have the source of that food be where that food is supposed to come from. And just simply understanding that, I think would have a massive impact and cut down time on because it took me a good period of time to kind of cut out foods that I didn't want to eat, etc. But once I really just committed to making that switch, my body felt a lot different very quickly. Relatively quickly, it's probably like a year or two. It's kind of gradual, but it's definitely worth doing because your body will feel a lot different. So that's one practical thing that I would do. Another practical thing that I do is, as you mentioned, the light, right? So it's understanding what light actually is. And so light is simply an input to your body. I'll try to make this like simple, right? It's like if we think about the sun can produce every different frequency that's on a light spectrum: red, blue, white, purple. I don't know. Is there purple? I think there's purple. I don't know. But it can produce all these different frequencies that are on the spectrum. If it couldn't, we wouldn't have it, because that's where we get our light from, is the sun. And so when we're in that light, we're getting what we're supposed to be getting in terms of those frequencies wherever the sun is at in the sky. If I'm sitting underneath like an artificial light, I'm getting one very specific frequency. It's not changing, whereas like the sun or the natural light is always changing. The light that I'm getting from artificial input is not actually changing. And so that is a stimulus into your system. So if we relate this to training, that could be like, let's say we only do impulses over and over and over again. That's all we do. That's the only input that we ever give to our system. That's probably not going to be ideal for us to operate. Just like if we only put one type of light into our system over and over and over and over again, that's not going to be an ideal input for us to be able to operate best. So as far as light goes, it's understanding that and then just like practically using that. It's what I like to do is I get outside in the morning every morning for 10, 15, 20 minutes and actually see real light before I do anything on any electronics. At night, I will, like an hour or two before I go to bed, it'll be either red light that would be like a sunset or just be dark or black. I mean, that's not doable for most people. So like red light is a good option for that. And those are two very easy things to just start to implement right away that can also affect your sleep and help you to sleep better. So those two things are like practical things that I would change from early on that would have a good impact on health. And then outside of those, I mean, honestly, the biggest thing would be the way that I thought, or just purely like my thinking, because my thinking and it 100% affects your health, the way that you think, because my thinking at that time was, to some greater or lesser degree, is like, I think I have to do everything on my own. I think there's a lot of people that want me to lose and want me to fail. And I felt like I was like in this own little cocoon that I built for myself. And that wasn't a healthy or a good state to be in. If I could change that and understand that, just because I may not see people in my environment right now that know how to like support and help me get better, just because I might not see that, it doesn't mean that those people don't exist. And then I would work to go out and actually find those people, get around those people, because that will then change my actual environment. And that is probably what would have the biggest impact, because that makes everything else easier, is when you put yourself in that different environment and actually are able to change the way that you think.
That's great. Those are fantastic nuggets, Brady. Thank you. Okay, so next, just kind of like a follow-up there. You mentioned in terms of the meat that you're getting, in terms of location and kind of where those animals, where that source is actually coming from. What do you look for, and even like where do you shop when you are going to the grocery store? Like, what do you look for label-wise? Is it grass-fed, organic? Is it like, kind of walk me through? You know, you're picking up a pack of whatever it is. What do you want to see or not see?
Yeah. So ideally, I get it from an actual farm where I can go and I can look. That's not necessarily doable for everybody. But so if I'm shopping at a store, I mean, personally, I shop at natural grocers. Any type of store like a natural grocer, as a Whole Foods, is going to be okay. Like those type of stores are going to be okay if you can't actually go to a farm. And specifically, what I'm looking for is going to be, I mean, regenerative is a really good thing to look for. I will say, like, labels are a little bit tough, because as labels come out, people and farms can find different ways to get around the labels, right? So it's always best, I'll preface this by saying it's always best to actually know who you're getting the meat from and know how they do it. But if you don't have that option, it'd be like, look for, fully grass-fed, like grass-fed start, grass-fed finish, it'll say like regenerative farming or regenerative something on it. And that's also a good thing to look for. No antibiotics, no pesticides, no like non-GMO, like those things are all good things to look for. As far as meat goes, that's pretty much what I look like. No antibiotics, all that type of stuff is what I'll look for on meat. And then when it comes to like fruit, vegetables, for those, I'm looking for organic. Like, and again, there's ways to say it's organic and not be as clean as it could be. That's why it's always better to actually know where you're getting it from. But if you don't have the option, that's what I'd look for.
Cool. Love it. Walk me through just one last kind of parallel in that thought and kind of that little segment. Walk me through a typical day of eating for you. What does that look like? And I'm curious, because I feel like I've seen you mention it before, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're never really looking at quote calories or anything like that. It's more of intuitive eating, right? So speak a little bit to that, because it was really interesting for me when I first heard you kind of talk about that. So I'm sure everybody on would love to hear you kind of talk about intuitive eating, and yeah, just share a little bit of your current diet, a day in the life almost of what you put in there.
Yeah, so it's gotten pretty honed in now. It's like very simple. So currently what I do is I'll eat twice. The first time will be around 10:30 in the morning, and I'll have a pound of some type of meat, which it'll either be beef, elk, bison, sometimes like wild boar. It'll be something like that, like a good meat source. I'll have a pound of that. And then along with that, I'll have like either wild rice, or there's noodles that I found that have like one ingredient in them. I'll have those, or I'll have like a potato, right? I'll have that, and then I'll have that with a vegetable. So that'll like 100% of the days, that's what I'm having at that time. And then later in the day, I'm having that exact same thing. It's just like I have that a second time. But I don't have the vegetable. And then throughout the day, I'll have some fruit sometimes. So it's that simple. And I just cycle through, like I said, the different meat options that I mentioned, and then also different kind of secondary options that I mentioned. I'll cycle through those. It took me a while to find that worked really well for me, because you mentioned the intuitive eating part. And so what I did when I first started looking at, like, okay, I'm not really feeling the way that I want to. I'm not necessarily eating everything that I want to. How can I actually figure out what my body likes? So the process that I went through there is, it was first of all understanding my body's going to have a response to everything it is that I eat, right? If I'm aware of what that response is, I can start to look at and understand what it is that my body actually likes. Now, an important piece of being able to do that is understanding that food can be manufactured for you to crave it. So your body can, like, your body won't actually feel good with that food, I guess, so is what I'm trying to say. Like, you may want it, but when you eat it, your body actually won't feel good. So an important part of the intuitive eating is be able to actually objectively look at, how does my body feel? So I could be like, I want I don't know, McDonald's or something like that. Like, I want it, and I eat it, and I'm like, I wanted it, so great. But your body actually physically feels terrible, right? So being able to interpret that is a big part of that. But so what I started to do is I started to look at, okay, what are all the different things that I could eat? You know, I could eat steak, or I could eat beef, I could eat pig, I could eat chicken, I could eat bison, elk. There's all these different things that I can eat. I started to introduce those to my system, and noted how my system responded. And as I noted how my system responded, I'll then look at, like, okay, that's probably something that's good for me. That's something that's good for me. That I didn't really feel that great with. I'm going to cut that out for now. Because something like whole milk, I absolutely loved whole milk. Whole raw milk, like, I loved it. I will encourage people to try or to drink it. But specifically at that time when I had it, I noticed, like, I wanted it, but there'd be extra mucus that would be produced from my body when I had it. So I was like, my body physically is producing a response that isn't ideal. So that's something that I'm not going to have right now. And so what I did is I just, like, went through all these different food options that I had. And then I started to look at, what does my body like? And that basically becomes the menu that I pull from. Like, now, like I said, now I've been doing that for, 3-4 years. And so I have it pretty damn, pretty locked in what I like and what my body likes. But that was the process that I went through to get to that point that I'm at now.
Like that. I haven't heard you kind of speak into almost like introducing things one by one. It's almost like doing like an allergy test in a sense, almost on your body through the food.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Whether it's an allergy or it's something else, whatever it is that causes that response that you don't necessarily like. And it doesn't mean that it has to be forever, but it's like right now, this is what actually makes my body feel good. So that's what I'm going to eat. And then over time, you can expand that or change it or whatever.
So, and one last question on nutrition side, because it made my brain kind of think about it. So stock Reeves meal is just like some form of like a white rice, avocado to get my fats, ground beef, something to make that taste a little bit better, whether it's seasoning or, like, as close to a clean Japanese barbecue, something, right? So I'm curious, because I heard you mention, obviously, your meat source. I heard you mention potato, like a veggie, right? Are you, in terms of macros, like when you're looking at it, I didn't hear you mention a lot of fats, right? Like, that's why I try and throw like an avocado scoop on there. Is that something you're actually doing, or is it something that you found that your body doesn't necessarily need to function at the really high level that you already function at now?
Yeah. I mean, the macros really for me come after I eat what I'm craving, I guess. And the meat that I have has a decent amount of fat in it, or I mean, it'll have some fat. I don't know, like beef will have a decent amount of fat, or bison will have a decent amount of fat. Like, if I have, I'm trying to think off the label, I want to say there's probably 44 grams of fat in like a pound of bison. And so if I have that twice, it's like 88 pounds because I have 2 pounds of meat a day. So it's like 88 pounds of fat, or not pounds, 88 grams of fat per day. Right. So I get a decent amount from that. But yeah, like macros, I don't really think about that much. I go based off, again, what I'm craving. And what's interesting is that it tends to play out, because I did the math on it. Like I said, I did the math on it. And my protein intake is roughly like 200 grams a day, which I weigh, 190 to 195. So it's about a gram per day without me even really. I didn't like that's generally a good recommendation is a gram of protein per day. I didn't set it up that way. It's just that's what happened to work out based on my cravings. And it's like it happens to line up with what is a good recommendation, right? So, yeah, I don't think too much about. I think it's a good idea to have a general awareness of the macros, and even like avocado is something. Okay, you introduce. Does your body like it? Does it taste good? And then if it does, like okay, keep it in. If it doesn't, then fine, we don't, and we can get it from other sources. Yeah.
Cool. I like it. I like it. I like it. Hey, what time do you need to hop off here? I want to keep you to
Like 5:35, 5:40, or sorry,
Okay,
6:45, 6:40 your time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. So I want to go back into training a little bit here. What would you say is the most overlooked piece of when we're looking at pitchers specifically, kind of the most overlooked piece of overhead rotational athletes? What do you really think that a majority of strength programs or kids that go to LA Fitness, what are they missing in the program that you wish you could just like please train, mix this, and what would that look like?
Right now it'd be the high rep work. And simply I say that because so few people actually do it. If there was everybody doing high rep work and no one was doing any heavy stuff, then I'd be like, oh, it's the heavy stuff. So it's really just like, what is it that most people are missing? And it happens to be that most people are missing the high rep work right now. And specifically the high rep work at high intensity. Because that's like, if you think about an equation to prepare somebody to be able to go pitch, or to be able to go throw, including your warm-ups and everything. Let's say you throw 150 to 175 pitches in your outing at a high level of intent, right? If we think about being able to, what that is, that's a high level of intensity plus a high level of volume. It's not one or the other. It's both of them, high intensity and high volume, right? So we want or need to find a way to introduce both high intensity and high volume into training to prepare for that. What seemingly has happened in the last, 10 to 15 years in baseball with pitchers is we've gotten really good at getting guys to throw hard. We've gotten we're fairly bad at getting them to stay healthy or allowing them to stay healthy. And when I look at the training, because even for me, this was a training that I did a while back, it was like the training was done at a high level of intensity where it's like we're preparing them to be able to lift a lot of weight, to be able to move very fast. But there would be dudes, and this was myself as well. Is like I would go run a 60, and I could run 2 or 3 of them. And after 2 or 3 of them, I was like, dude, I'm dead. I'm like, I can do this a couple times, but that's it, because it's the way that I trained, right? And so the high volume along with the high intensity, like I think that the high volume is the piece that's missing. And so practically that would be like the high volume impulses, there's high volume in slow lowers because of the duration of time that we're in it. Like there's a very high time under tension, or whatever you want to say there. Like that type of work is what I see missing in the majority of programs, as I interpret like the equation for how to prepare athletes to throw in games hard very often.
Cool. Okay, so then leading into that, when would you say, because I get this question a ton, when is the best time to start a DAC performance type of training program?
Yeah, so I'm biased right now.
Please be biased. Yeah.
No, but there's so it's not a there is a gradient in which we can introduce people, or in which I do introduce people into the programming when we're working individually with somebody, right? There's a gradient in which we can introduce somebody where it's like, we don't necessarily need you to do everything all at once right at the start. We can introduce things slowly based on where you're at. And even if it's somebody, like if it's your guys that are a little more auto-regulating what it is that they're doing, it's like at the start, because I'll always give set and rep ranges within what we're doing. It'll be like, 1 to 3 sets, 2 to 5 sets, whatever. At the start, it'd be like, okay, let's do the lowest set number, rep number that is recommended, because we're introducing all this stuff into your system. And then as you start to get more prepared for it, and as you get more used to it, then we go to the higher sets and rep numbers. Maybe, we could do that, right? Go to the higher sets and rep numbers that are recommended as we go through the program on any given day. And so what that allows to happen is like, we can introduce that at any point, and it works. To me, it works because like it's the way that our body is designed to work. Like if something works, it should work no matter when you start. Because even with that, with a lot of the high rep work, a lot of times what happens is the first couple of days that people do it, they're like, my body feels better than it's ever felt. Like if I have somebody do a set of 100 joint moves at every single joint for upper body for a thrower, they'd be like, dude, I've never done anything like this. Whole body feels like butter. Like this is amazing, right? So I don't think there's necessarily a wrong time to start. It's just like, if you're in the middle of your season, understand that, and then we can introduce it a little more intelligently. But even at that time, like if the training is better, it's still better. And why would we want to prolong that?
I love it. And then, so a parallel on that as well, when we're looking at a youth athlete, I'm going to define youth as kind of 12 and under.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of things, and I'm going to kind of hit on the impulses. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on, is that something you would want to see an athlete do? If they go, I mean, maybe they're still a multi-sport athlete, but they just love baseball. They love, throwing, they love pitching. Is that something you would want to see at that age, or is there kind of a training age that you want to establish before maybe some of that higher intensity training gets kind of underway?
No, I wouldn't hold them back from that. I mean, because really, if we look at the upper body impulses as compared to something like a sprint is just your foot hitting the ground with that very high peak force. Sprinting and jumping. Kids do this all the time. They're very good at it, right? Like they don't need strength train for 3 years before they can go sprint and jump. Most kids can go sprint and jump because that's what they're designed to do, right? And so the impulses I don't look at as needing, or any of the exercises, I don't necessarily look at needing a training age to start them. It's more like the gradient of the exercise, because if it's somebody's first time, or if it's my first time doing an exercise, because the exercise is new, the actual level of intensity that I'm going to be able to go at it with is going to be lower because I'm new to it and I don't exactly know what I'm doing. And so it's like naturally going to lower the level of intensity that I can put into it. As I get more used to it and as I get more accustomed to it, then I can start to put more into it because I actually know what I'm doing. And so I think of it in a similar way for youth athletes, is like we're still going to use everything that we have kind of like in the holster to use. It's just specifically for youth, I'm going to have it be more fun for the most part. Like the exploration stuff that we do at the start, if they're in a group, like I'm probably going to have them do, some type of game for a longer period of time. And then we'll finish with some type of training type stuff, but it'll be like somehow competitive or a way to engage them a little bit more. But I'm not going to just like arbitrarily hold back exercise types, because if it works, then it should work for whoever it is that we're putting in, if we understand how to progress and regress. Like an impulse
analogy.
Yeah, well, like an impulse, for me, like an impulse is like, I'm going as hard as I possibly can. We could still do an impulse for a 10-year-old, but it's like, okay, well, all you're going to do is we're going to like put on a beat. It's just like, duh, 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 like a beat in the background. And they're just like hitting to that, but it's like, just be rhythmic with it. Right. So we're still doing the same exercise. We're still doing the same impulse, but it's creating a different effect because of how we're doing it. And that's a way to introduce it to someone that would be like, a youth or something like that. And then we can build up from there.
I love it. Okay. Two more big ones, 2.5 big ones, and then hopefully that might take us right to our time. So talk to me about the role of the skill coach and the strength coach, or the roles of the skill coach and the strength coach, and how they impact. I've definitely shared with my guys that I train how crucial it is that they stick to what is in true coach, when you're programmed for them, and that, my role is great and I'm going to help them as much as I can. And I define it as, look, I can give you the best, plyo care and netball drills, whatever it is, it's going to work on movement patterns. But I want to get your own insights into kind of how those two roles kind of mesh with each other.
Yeah, this is a good question, because the way that I view the strength coach, or what I do, is I very simply want to be able to give a human being, or in your case, let's say give a baseball player, right? I want to give them the ability to access every aspect of their body to be able to use in a throw. So like ankle, I want you to be able to invert and evert fully. Dorsiflex and plantar flex fully. Or knee, flex and extend. Hip, internally, externally rotate. Adduct, abduct. flex, extend, like all these different things at your different joints. I want to give you the tools to be able to utilize those in full. And that's why there's so many different variations of what we do within the training. Is like we're hitting every joint from every different angle in a bunch of different ways, whether it's, you know, high impact with an impulse, or it's a band resisted move, or it's a joint move, or it's a heavy weighted move, or it's a move for duration. The whole goal is to give you the ability to access the entirety of your body in every different direction that it can move. So then you go to Reeves or you go to your skill guy, and it's like, okay, this athlete is now literally better because they're able to access everything that they have. And so now when you give them something to do, like, hey, let's try to sit into your glute more, or let's try to whatever the thing is, they have the physical capacity to access that, and it makes the transition into the skill work much easier. If like contrarily to that, we're to be like, the only thing that we do in strength training is we squat, we bench, we do our scap wall slides, and we do our T-spine mobility. Well, there could be a bunch of stuff that we're missing and we're not hitting. And so that now when you go to the mountain, like you feel like you're moving like a brick because we haven't actually trained you to move in all those different directions. So it's like, it's a very interconnected web where I want to be able to provide the capacity to move every way that you can move, and to be able to do that at high intensities and high volumes so that you don't fatigue and you don't get injured during it. And then that allows the skill coach to then be able to make changes more easily in the actual like skill. So, I mean, when that works well, like that's a good combo.
Absolutely. And obviously my guys have noticed a big difference of when I stopped trying to wear two hats at once, and, you know, we were able to have you take over on the, you know, the strength, strength coach side, right?
Yeah.
So,
well,
you know,
like,
it's been phenomenal.
Yes. Like something as simple as the joint moves. It's like, if we do, because I mean, I've done this before, is like, if I do a week straight of just joint moves, upper body, lower body joint moves every day, what's physically happening with that is we're taking literally every joint that you have, moving in every direction that you can move, and doing it for high volumes. And by the end of that week, it's like, holy shit, like I can move my shoulder, or I'm aware of my shoulder in a way that I wasn't before. I'm aware of my hip in a way that I wasn't before. And it works to create that. So now you can go use that elsewhere. So yeah.
It's so funny because you mentioned the word when you're talking about the joint moves, they make you feel like butter. And I swear to you, I had an athlete 5 minutes before we hop on say that he just finished doing his joint moves after one of his high intensity. He's just like, dude, I feel like butter. And so it is. It's just like there's no other way to describe it. Like it, that you just have to experience. So I really enjoy it. And yeah, that's huge changes. That's awesome. Okay, so in the oh shit category, we're gonna talk about rehab, right? I have a skill coach, and they totally mess up a kid's workload or what they don't handle, and you know, they're just ripping pull downs 20 days in a row, and bye goes the UCL, right? Talk to me about what you want to see in terms of rehab process, and I don't even want to define the question much to you because I know how talented you are at this rehab process. So I really just want you to speak freely into how you view that whole kind of situation of, you know, from injury to getting back to, you know, and like working with a skilled coach and beyond.
Yeah. So the first thing to understand with an injury in a rehab scenario is that when you have an injury, or when an individual has an injury, your body's going to remember that injury to some greater or lesser degree. And the reason that your body does that is because your body's basic goal is to survive. An injury is a direct threat to its survival. And so it's going to try to keep you away from that thing that caused the injury, which threatened your survival. So it's a very proper response to where you got your throat, you feel your UCL pop, and like the range that you have the next day is this. Like that is a very proper response from your body because your survival has just been threatened. And so now it's going to lock you down to tell you can't do this because it threatened your survival. Like it's a very good response, right? I mean, we don't like it, but as far as protecting your body goes, it's proper, like it's a good response. And so if we start with that, with understanding that an injury is a threat to survival, what we want to do during a rehab process is be able to, or allow your body, you, etc., to see that you can now use that area or do that thing again without it being a threat to survival. So in the case or the instance where I feel that pop, and like the next day I'm here. Or let's say I get Tommy John surgery a month later, and the first day it's like, it's here. This is all the range that I have. In order for us to allow your body to see that it no longer has to protect that, we need to start to use it. Because every time that we use it and move it, we're sending information from that up to your brain. You're able to process that, and then you have a response to it. The response that comes down is what dictates the level of pain or tightness or inhibition that you have. So as we start to use it and move it, let's say this is day 1, day 2 is like here, day 3 is more like there, day 4 is more like there. As we start to allow ourselves to open that up and send information over and over and over and over, you start to be able to remap what's going on there, and then it can take off those inhibitors because it now knows what's happening, and you're literally showing it through the movement that we're doing. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, and then it can start to see that it doesn't have to lock down and protect anymore. And so we want to take that from the initial injury or the initial surgery, because surgery in itself is an injury. You're literally getting cut open by somebody else. Like, that is an injury, right? We take it from the initial injury or surgery. We start very regressed, as we need to, and we progress it over time. And the goal is by the end of a rehab for you to know through the work that you've done that you can go throughout without feeling any need to inhibit or be afraid of it. Like, very simple way that I like to explain this is, if I go and I walk out my house and I break my ankle on a curb, right? The next time that I go to walk off that curb, I'm going to be very careful walking off that curb. I've walked off a million curbs in my life, but like this specific curb, this specific time, I'm going to be careful because last time I broke my ankle on it, right? If though, over the next 6 months, 12 months, I walk off that curb 6,000 times and I move my ankle 10,000 times, and I'm showing it over and over and over and over and over again, like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're good. At some point, I'm going to be like, this is just another curb and I don't need to worry about it anymore, right? And so that is the goal of the rehab, is we have the initial injury. At first, you're going to be scared of it. You're going to be like, my body's locked down, but we do it enough over and over and over and over again that eventually you can go like walk off the curb again or go throw again. And you're like, I don't have to think about it, or I don't need to think about it, or it's just like gone. And so that's, to me, that's the ultimate, is like, you had an injury, you had a surgery, when the rehab is finished, when you're like, I don't care. And just like, I'm good to go, and I know I'm good to go, and there's no need to think about it. So that's like the process, or the kind of, time frame that we want to go over as we go through rehab from injury up to completion of that.
I love it. And I've seen, we'll speak specifically into like Austin Harford. That has just been unbelievable to watch him go through your rehab process. In his first couple of throws, I was like, dude, are you sure? Like, you really had a UCL surgery, like positive? So it's been awesome. Okay. I got one more question, and I'll try to leave it at least for maybe one question from the guys here. You're still good on time?
Yeah. I mean, 3 to 5 more minutes and I'll have to get going, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So one tip, and I'm curious here. One tip, obviously you run your own business and everything. One tip for anybody else that's looking to start their own business, do something similar to you. I get this question a lot. So I want to hear from you, your perspective on.
Yeah. So I can only speak from what I've done, right? So it's, first of all, to me, I need to have done, or I need to know what I'm doing before I talk about something, or I just need to simply share what I'm doing. Like, that's really how I do it. Is, as far as training goes, I'm going to go and I'm going to train myself and test whatever theories, ideas, concepts that I have. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to communicate that I'm just going to communicate that on the platform, right? I communicate that on the platform. I'm consistent with it. I do it over and over and over again. I show that I'm able to get results, right? But just build that up over time. Like, do that long enough. And eventually at some point, there's going to be somebody that's like, okay, I'm going to be willing to give this a try. And then you just build momentum over and over and over again. The part that I see where most people fail is just, there's a lack of consistency, right? There's like 2 weeks where they do it, and then they're gone for a week, and then they're there for 3 weeks, and they're gone for a week and a half, and then they're there for 3 days, and then they don't do it for like 21 days. And like, oh, I'm back, I'm going again. It's like, nobody is going to, or at least if you want to grow a business that continues to grow, like, nobody's going to invest in that because they don't see that you're there consistently. And so it's like, actually do it yourself, like actually do what you're talking about, actually do it, share what it is that you're doing, and then be consistent with it. And it's like, you almost can't help but to start to grow that.
That's really good advice. Okay, last little question here. We'll go to John. Go ahead, man. Unmute yourself and ask Brady whatever you got, and probably leave that.
Yeah. So I know training like a drop catch, barbell drop catch, bent over rows, drop catch, shoulder press. I kind of wanted to know the reason we use that instead of just a regular barbell bench, a regular row, a regular shoulder press.
Yeah, good question. So the basic difference is, like, when we use the rebound rep stuff, like I'm going to drop, it actually physically leaves my hands if I'm doing a bench, or my feet physically leave the ground if I'm going to be doing a squat, for instance. When that happens and we catch it, everything has to like turn on at once. There's like a natural mechanism within our body that when we drop something and we catch it, like everything fires at once. So it's similar to where I was talking about the impulses, where like when we hit, there's that peak that goes up very fast. Same thing happens in a rebound rep. And it just so happens that that's what a lot of like sport and athletic is, or athleticism is there's these peaks, right? Like the faster that somebody can accelerate or accept force, the more athletic that person is generally going to be. And so I found those to be, we'll still occasionally do, as you guys know, like we'll still occasionally do regular bench or regular squat, but I like the rebound reps simply for that reason, because we're asking your body to turn on extremely fast with a very high load, like very high force, and to do that over and over and over again. And I like that for transfer to athleticism more than I do a normal bench or a normal squat or a normal move of whatever it is that we're doing.
Perfect. Thank you, man.
Yes, sir.
Brady, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, man. You are phenomenal what you do, and I'm really grateful that you've been able to train my guys, because I've seen a world of difference. So just want to tell you thank you as much as I can, because it's been a huge push for my guys. So yeah, man, I appreciate you taking the time, and looking forward to keep seeing what you're posting and keep growing DAC, man.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you trusting me with the strength training for all your guys. So it's fun, and I'm looking forward to keeping it going.
Hell yeah. Boys, thank you for hopping in. And this will be posted to YouTube as well if you guys want to go back and rewatch anything. So with that, y'all have a good rest